Hey, Leadership on the Rocks community. All right, you know it and I know it. When you get the promotion, your organization's going to give you the title, the pay, and the people, but they won't necessarily equip you in how to lead. And this can leave you sitting in a valley of absolute overwhelm where you're fighting the same daily fires you always seem to be fighting. You feel like you just can't get ahead. Well, I get it. And that's why I created my 5-day leadership makeover challenge. If you take my leadership challenge in just 5 days, I'm going to show you the right proactive tools that you need to get ahead and to put out those daily fires that you're always fighting. In fact, I'm going to show you what it takes to get to the next level and get another promotion and increase your influence and impact. So it's super easy and it's free. Just go to leadershipontherocks.com/5 days. That's the number 5. So again, go to leadershipontherocks.com/5 days to join my 5-day leadership makeover challenge. So don't miss out on this challenge. Give me 5 days with you and go to leadershipontherocks.com/5 days.
Mindful leaders really do practice mindfulness, meaning what is going on and how is it making me feel. So a mindful leader in a moment having a conversation with an employee that feels kind of sticky, we have to check in with ourselves first as the leader in those conversations that might feel a little sticky. But that mindful leader, they don't have loose lips. You know that old expression, loose lips sink ships? I mean, that is so true. So when we have a leader that just They haven't thought through the moment that they're going to have with the client.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Raysha Clark about organizational psychology and leading in the age of mental health awareness. Raysha Clark is the founder and clinical director of The Collective, a holistic private counseling practice geared towards bringing clients healing using a variety of treatment approaches. Raysha's approach is cemented in the idea that clients seek her out for a variety of reasons, but the goal is always to get from here to somewhere over there. She is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Arkansas and is certified in both neurofeedback and brain spotting. Raysha currently works within the community as an advocate for those with disabilities. She has the privilege of serving on the board of directors for Disability Rights Arkansas and the Down Syndrome Advancement Coalition. Within the next 5 years, Raysha has envisioned her practice servicing more communities impacted by trauma with neurofeedback and bringing more organizations insight on how to incorporate business and organizational psychology into their agencies. Psychotherapy, coaching, and consulting fill a large part of her day, but she regularly enjoys quiet moments with the kiddos and bourbon served neat. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Raysha. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, Bethany, it is so good to see you, to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Man, well, I'm so excited to talk to you. Number one, you're just such an expert in your field. I can't wait to learn all things from you. But I also got to say, I love that you drink bourbon served neat because I'm Leadership on the Rocks for a reason. I got to have some ice in there. Otherwise, my face is going to be like all squished up, like, oh, I can't do it. So I applaud you from the start that you could drink bourbon served neat. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Just a little sip, just sip on.
That's what my husband does. I struggle with that. But, the reason I really wanted to have you on the podcast is leaders, number one, the struggle is real. We probably need our own counseling sessions. But we're also leading in a time where mental awareness is out there. Like everybody's learning about it. It's becoming, and I don't want to say buzzword because it's important, but everybody kind of knows about it and what it is. So we really need to talk about what role mental health plays in our places of work. So Raysha, I'm just officially deeming you the Leadership on the Rocks professional counselor.
Got it.
Yes.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. So really, we need your help. We need your help. And here's a perfect example. So I read a Times Magazine article the other day, and for my international listeners, forgive me, this article was totally focused on the US, but the article gave several facts, and I was just honestly shocked. I was shocked at what it was saying about mental health. And so I'm just going to read these to make sure I don't mess them up. Almost 1/3 of US adults now report symptoms of either depression or anxiety. 1 in 5 have recently received some kind of mental health care. About 1 in 8 U.S. adults now take antidepressants. And 1 in 25 adults have a serious mental illness like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. And then this one just blew my mind. Between 2019 2022, about 40% of mental health services have jumped, right? They've jumped 40% because people are saying, hey, I need to go get help. And then here's the sad statistic is still suicide rates have risen 30% from the 2000s. So just in like taking in that data, and I'm not a professional, that's why I brought you on. But I mean, for me, it had some major ahas. And the first aha is number one, the campaign to kind of destigmatize mental health and mental awareness has really started working. Like, would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, very much so. Almost to a fault. So,
I cannot
so
wait to dive into that statement deeper.
yeah, almost to a fault, but I'm grateful for it. So, I say knowledge is power when you allow it to be. So when
Absolutely.
we have social media, when we have the internet, we have access to so many things. So that's great. It only really becomes knowledge for you whenever you take it, digest it, apply it to your life, or you get information that is actually valid and appropriate for you. And so when we have social media, sometimes there's information that's presented that gets skewed to, I don't know, rev up kind of like our rates or views or whatever. I don't do social media, so I don't know what you call that stuff. But to get more views, we will sensationalize some of the things in my profession. And it just makes me want to pull my hair out, hence me having no hair, because I'm just like, guys, stop it. That is not so.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we can talk about that more later. But I'm grateful that access is going up. Now it's just to clean up what is being said, because when clients come into my office, they tell me, oh, Raysha, I have this diagnosis and this diagnosis and this diagnosis. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, honey, who told you that? That's always my
Google.
first question. Yeah, Dr. Google told me. And so it's not, it's APR and TikTok. One of the two are almost always the ones that have diagnosed clients before they come to me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, knowledge is power, but I'm grateful that more people are just caring that mental health matters, because in the workforce, these are the humans. So all those statistics that you read are the humans that make up our workforce. And so if we
Mm-hmm.
don't care about their mental health, then we're essentially saying we don't care about our workforce. And then we have to
Oh.
look at ourselves whenever our workforce and our agencies are shutting down, our businesses are closing, because we can't have humans to staff them because we never cared about them to begin with. So
Oh, see,
super
there's
important.
so much in there to dive in. I mean, that's why I'm so excited to have you on here because it's so important, right? People make up our workforce, but people are struggling. Think about in this day and age, we talk a lot and kind of in the workplaces, it's about bringing your whole self to work. And, I stand behind that. Yes, bring your whole self to work, but our whole self is struggling. And so how do we serve people whose whole self is kind of shattered and broken or not able to really fully step into those functions? But I want to back up for a second and just go with, okay, we have access to all this information. And yes, I am so with you. Like in education, our big thing was, guys, there's a bunch of trash out there. Like you have to have critical thinking to discern what is true and what is people just using fallacies to get you to watch to beat the algorithms to get their views up, right? And so can you help us understand just first of all, just misconceptions about mental health first, so we can kind of have a baseline for this conversation of what's true, what's not true?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to tell people that assume if they forget things or they can't concentrate well, that it's not necessarily ADHD. I oftentimes will tell clients when they come in, I'll put my hands up in a pyramid. For those that are like me, that are visual learners, I give them this pyramid for them to see. But it's essentially that ADHD, depression, and anxiety, there's a triangulation of symptomology. And so, what I mean when I say that is that there are 5 or 6 different symptoms that are applicable to anxiety, that's applicable to depression, that's applicable to ADHD. And so, when we get a client in and we sit them down and we go through all of the symptoms that they're, saying that are showing up in their lives, I ask them a couple of screening questions and things of that nature, but they're oftentimes surprised that it's not ADHD that's on the surface, but rather depression that is showing up as lack of concentration or poor task initiation. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a misnomer right there, is that just because I forget to do things, or just because I can't motivate myself to do something, or just because my mind is always racing, that doesn't mean that I have ADHD and I need to go get a prescription for that. you need to be assessed by a mental health professional to kind of figure out what exactly is going on and why your symptoms are manifesting.
Man, that's so
There's
good. So we got to stop with the self-diagnosis with Dr. Google.
Yes, 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 absolutely, absolutely. If you come in, and that's the thing, when you have a practitioner that knows how to kind of slow that conversation down, it
Mhm.
will right itself. My concern is when there are some that will go to providers that are trying to get folks in and out, and they don't take that time to have that human to human conversation. It's just practitioner to patient on the couch. I think some things get missed. And so when we take that time as professionals and practitioners to kind of go through those symptoms, we can help that client to better see what is really going on in their life. Because if they come in there with the preconceived notions, they get a script, they're on their way, then they come back, they don't understand why it's not working. Well,
Mhm.
now I have borderline personality disorder because that didn't work. Because remember, I only have ADHD. And it's like,
Mhm. I get it. And think about just society in general. Like we want that quick fix. We want that magic peel. And so often, no, it takes really peeling back all those layers of the onion to get to the root cause of it. But that's
yeah,
not typically how we want things to go. So I love what you're saying. And it's great leadership, that relationship piece between therapist and client of coming in and talking and kind of peeling back all those layers to find out, okay, what are the symptoms? What are the causes of this? And then hopefully reach that diagnosis so you can get true healing, not just hey, here's a prescription for an antidepressant and see you later.
absolutely. I tell my clients skills before peels, right? So let's look at your coping skills, what you're doing now before we start entertaining peels. Now, if you need a peel to implement your skills, gotcha. But let's see what we're working with now. I want to empower you to use what you already know to do. And if that doesn't work, then we absolutely can refer it. I'm not anti-medication. I am
Mhm.
pro you. So if that means we're looking deep at you, it'll be uncomfortable. But if you never gave yourself permission, if you always had someone tell you that you weren't worth considering or thinking about,
Oh,
or your feelings were even, important, then of course you're never going to look at you. So I'm going to pause you. And that's why I'm not for everybody. I've had clients tell me, yeah, no, I don't think this is going to work. Okay, baby, here are some options for you. I
mhm.
have a list that I keep as referrals just so people can go to another safe space and try it there.
Yeah.
They'll eventually keep bumping into walls, but yeah, you gotta try your skills before we do this.
Oh man, I love that so much. So, speaking of skills, help
Mhm.
us leaders, right? I mentioned about people bringing their whole selves, and our whole selves are a little bit broken.
Yeah.
So, how can leaders learn the skills that we need to be better leaders for the people that are coming that just have these jagged edges, who aren't feeling whole, who aren't feeling complete, who are struggling mentally? How can we be better leaders for them? Can you help us out with that?
Yeah, I don't always necessarily prescribe to bring your whole self to work. And why I say that is because sometimes there are parts of you that should not show up to work. I don't necessarily want to know about your at-home drama. I don't need your drama from home coming to work. So if you show up as your whole self, that means all the stuff comes with you. That's just not appropriate. However, we're in a climate now to where employers don't really feel empowered to have boundaries anymore about what kind of workplace culture they want to have. So I think that's the biggest one, is deciding, if you show up in your whole self, does that still stay within the parameters of what our workforce culture is? And
Mm.
as leaders, if we don't know the culture of our environment, whether that's our environment at home, in our ministries, at the workforce, if we don't know what that climate is, we're failing our employees because we're not consistently having the same boundaries for everyone, because we don't even know what those boundaries should look like.
That is so good. And here I'm just going to, well, I don't even know if I'm going to play devil's advocate because this may showcase my ignorance, but in thinking about, I feel like a lot of people lead out of fear. We don't want to be on the news. We don't want to have somebody like sue us because they felt like we didn't accept their whole self. But I love the point that you're making. And that is one of the essential rocks in which, me and my whole program stand on is clarity in values, culture, identity of the organization, and all of those things. But I think so often we're so scared that somebody else could find it offensive. Well, you're not allowing me to bring my whole self to work, that we don't clarify it, we don't talk about it, and we definitely don't hold people accountable to it. And it's creating a very messy workforce that's not fair for the employer and definitely not fair for the employee because they don't have clear guidelines. They don't know the clear expectations of this is how we do things here. This is how we behave here in this profession. And so I love, love, love that you pointed it out because it's almost like you're giving us permission as the mental health professional to say it is still okay to have boundaries, to have clarity, to have expectations of what people should and shouldn't do at your place of work. So thank you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That goes back from the very beginning when we're hiring people and then onboarding them. That looks like having a clear vision that you can articulate to the prospective employee to say, this is kind of how we roll. This is what our dress code looks like. Here are some examples of what that looks like. This is
Mhm.
what professional, behavior is an expectation that we have of you. This is what that would look like. At the forefront, you're setting the tone of before we hire you and you say that this is a place that you want to work, do you agree to these terms? Like it's like checking the box of terms and conditions. You have to have those conversations very early on. And what that also does is set the tone for that employee to know, oh, we dialogue at this place. We talk about things at this place because you have to, you should, you better. Like if we're not doing evaluations and talking through those, if we're not having quarterly meetings and talking through things that are highs and lows and areas of improvement, what are we doing? How can we point our
Mhm.
finger at our subordinates if we're not giving them opportunities to showcase themselves of what they're saying they're doing every quarter, or us
Yeah.
having a roundtable to say, hey, ooh, let's talk about some of the stuff that I'm noticing here, right? Like if we only wait once a year to go poo poo on you, uh, I don't think we're doing it.
Yeah. Oh man, that's what people do all the time. Wait till that, evaluation and then just dump a bunch of negativity and there was no conversation prior. Oh, that is such a pet peeve of mine. And so help us understand as we're navigating, right? We feel the pressure to make everybody feel comfortable. But then again, sometimes in leadership, especially when you're having accountability conversations or clarifying expectations, it's very uncomfortable. So, can you kind of walk us through that whole journey of just one? Let's just start here. What is some psychology 101 that leaders need to know and understand when it comes to just serving people first, right? So, what's some psychology 101 that we need to be aware of to better understand mental health, how it plays out in the workplace so that we can lead better?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest things that I tell people is actually one of the 3 points I was going to tell you guys about today to kind of wrap up is mindful leaders really do practice mindfulness, meaning to me, my definition of mindfulness is quite simply what is going on and how is it making me feel. So, a mindful leader in a moment having a conversation with an employee that feels kind of sticky, they're being mindful. Hey, how's this conversation impacting me right now? Like, I'm feeling a little something. How's it impacting me? We have to check in with ourselves first as the leader in those conversations that might feel a little sticky. But that mindful leader, they don't have loose lips. You know that old expression, loose lips sink ships? I mean, that is so true. So when
Oh,
we
that's
have
so
a
good.
leader that just they haven't thought through the moment that they're going to have with the client. I tell my clients all the time, if you know you're going to have a sticky conversation, you can only have 3 to 5 talking points. Our human attention span isn't going to go much further than that, nor will our walls of deflection or defense allow us to have many more kind of like poo
Mhm.
poo poos than that. So you really got to get your best points out, 3 to 5 points. Make them concise, really just stick to that. And then know as the person is being on the receiving end of this that they might not have even anticipated. Oh, please never say when a person is sharing their rebuttal to what you're saying and they didn't like it. Never tell a person, you know what, this is no longer effective or productive. We'll find another time when you've calmed down. Please never tell a person when they are sharing their big feelings that they are not sharing something that is valuable to you. When you say this conversation is not productive, you're essentially saying the only thing that is productive is what I have to say as the leader. None of what you say is productive. That's never going to go over well. So what I would advise leaders to do is to stop that conversation down, slow it down, and be transparent. Don't state what you feel because you're ready to escape that moment with the person, but rather to slow it down and state what we know is. And what I tell people all the time to say is, ooh, this conversation got heated fast and I wasn't anticipating that. State what is, state the obvious, right? Or, hey, you know what? I didn't anticipate that you would feel so strongly about this. I want to back up to some of the points that you were saying. Now it's a dialogue, it's a conversation. It's not just a one sided, hey, do this, and fix this.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of that, all of those words to come back to say, be concise and be in the moment with a human that you potentially could make to feel like they're being dehumanized. No one really takes criticism well. That's just kind of it. We
Yeah.
should in the workforce because, I mean, that's what makes us decent humans is knowing that we're not above reproach. But sometimes employees, they're not going to have that bandwidth, like you were saying, coming in with the jagged edges. So you meet them with their jagged edges and you put bubble wrap around them so they're bouncing off of your bubble wrap, not your condemning or what could be perceived as condemning thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's so good. And I mean, at the heart of all of that is just the humanity, not stepping into conversations as I have all the knowledge, all the power, and I'm right. And you did everything wrong. And this is all about the negativity of you versus what needs to happen is true dialogue. Hey, I
Yeah,
see you. I do need to have a hard or sticky conversation, as you said.
yeah,
And so here, let's talk about these very, short, concise points and not too many. But also, it's going to be a dialogue back and forth because Lord knows as leaders, we have to have better understanding of where they're coming from. And here's one thing I just is a big aha for me is people are not in your head. As a leader, you're probably thinking about a million things. You've had a bunch of conversations that other people have not been in on, or you've been in meetings. You got to stop assuming that people know what you know and know what you're thinking. And then we just place all of these assumptions about people in that they're going against us or whatever. We can get so defensive even stepping into that and consider it self-righteousness.
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
and I love that. Thank you so much. So, how do we assess a situation? And it doesn't matter even what the situation is. If you need an example, here's a big buzzword that everybody's using. I'm so burned out, right? There's an employee that's burned out. But whenever you're engaging with an employee, whatever, from a meeting to a hallway conversation to whatever, if something starts to feel off, how do we truly assess the situation? And then more importantly, how do leaders think through, like you were talking about mindfulness, how do we think through so that we can respond appropriately in that situation?
Absolutely. Going back to stating what is, not assumptions, right? So you said something a little earlier about having those conversations and then there being like a power struggle that's going on. That almost always is going to happen whenever we tell someone, up, this isn't, effective anymore. Let's not have this conversation, blah, blah, blah. It's that power differential, and so it's this instant reminder we've shot you down with all the things that you're doing wrong or the thing that you need to improve on, and then
Mhm.
said, now you're dismissed, go away somewhere, until you can get your bearings back. So whenever we are noticing employees that have maybe symptoms of burnout, we always go back to the what is. So if we have a person that in their first 90 days, which is very common, they are, just stellar, super excited, really engaged. They are learning their ropes and becoming the subject matter expert of their ropes. So we can expect them to have pretty good work performance in that first 90 days. It's still very new. So they're still trying to fill everybody out. But in the meantime, they're filling everybody out. They're making sure that they don't have any of their own flaws exposed. And so
Mhm.
after that kind of honeymoon stage, whatever, so the rest of that year, so the next 9 months are always so pivotal to see if a person's really enjoying what it is that they're doing. You might see more questions come up. You might see some confusion come up because as quick as we're trying to learn something, we go through that so fast that we oftentimes make mistakes. And so now we
Mhm.
start to see leaders doing more corrective actions like, hey, I noticed you turned this in. We needed to be it this way. And now the person's like, well, gosh, do I know what I'm doing? So a lot of their confusion. So going back to what we think could be going on might not at all.
Mhm.
That employee might have a defense mechanism that seems very grouchy or whatever. And that could just be their anxiety that's showing up in the moment when you're confronting them, right? About, am I doing this right? So, you know what I just realized? I
What?
realized I don't remember what you asked me. What am I supposed to be saying again?
How do we assess a situation so that we can respond appropriately?
Yes.
But everything that you said was so good, and it still is the foundation of what we needed to answer that question. So now you can take it to application. How do we assess the situation in order to respond appropriately?
Yes, 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 yes. So when you approach the employee, it is stating what is. So it could be something as simple as, you know what? I remember a time where you were able to turn in assignments, the same day that they were due. I've noticed in the last few months, however, assignments are coming in later. I want to have a conversation because I'm afraid there could be some burnout going on. Is there something going on that we, employee to supervisor, need to talk about? So that gives the employee room to know they see me, right? And
Mhm.
it doesn't even necessarily put them on notice to do better, but rather I'm seen, so people see me. So that gives them a chance to say, well, no, it's not. I love my job. I'm not burned out here. I just got a lot of stuff going on at home. And
Yeah.
so then if the organization is big enough, you can say, well, we have EAP benefits, employee benefits that we can send you to. We can maybe have you talk to someone if that would be appropriate. But we only ever meet an employee with what we know to be true, not speculation. I see that with businesses I consult with so much. I look at some of their records on the conversations that were had, the emails that were had, and there's so much assumption in there. I'm like, but where's the
Mhm.
meat and taters? What's real? Where's the substance? And if you
Mhm.
don't, and you're going in there just kind of like shooting darts, you're throwing them off. And again, it's that power differential. Nobody responds well in that kind of environment.
Man, that is so true. We just walk around throwing our assumptions around and just making guesses at what we think. And oftentimes, we will judge ourselves based upon the best of intentions, but we rarely do that with other people. We don't give them the benefit of the doubt. We just throw that negativity on them and, assign them as guilty of whatever was in our head. And then we step into that conversation, and that's the pure opposite of what we need to do. So thank you for clarifying that. I think it's so good. Kind of moving from just leadership and then those interactions with people, right? Walking up on a conversation or noticing, and what I'm hearing is what you've said first is mindfulness. I got to be aware and really in touch with how things are affecting me internally, because that's going to affect how I respond or react if I have big emotions. So mindfulness, but then also noticing people and coming to the table with dialogue versus power struggles or assumptions. But then let's step into a broader range of just organizational psychology, right? I know this is your sweet spot. You love to consult with organizations, but let's just start at 101 again. What is organizational psychology? Can you help us understand what that is?
Yes, 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 yes. I love it. So came around the same time psychology was a big deal in the 1800s. And so it got pretty big around, I don't know, the early 1900s, right around World War One. World War One was taking place. But, IO Psych really and truly is looking at the human behavior in a work environment. That is essentially organizational psychology. And so it has just really shifted since World War One for sure, from let's find the best man with the best work ethic to turn the best kind of production out. That's a win. How can we do that? So that was the essence and the heart of it.
Mm-hmm.
But since COVID, we are no longer like employees kind of have the upper hand because employers are like, can I get a body to come in to do some of the job description and in hopes to keep my building and my business going? So we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing shifts in how OrgPsych is really kind of transforming agencies now because it is no longer production driven. It really is, okay, we have to look at this as in a different approach, going back to how human behavior is impacting the workforce.
Yeah. And it seems like the power has somewhat shifted where you had businesses, I have a job opening and I am now assessing applicants. It's more like I have a job opening, applicants are assessing, do I want to work for you? And I've seen even in hiring, tons of people I've seen people, apply for a job, interview for a job, be offered a job, and then turn it down. Turns out, no, I don't like your organization. I'd prefer to go work for this one. So I see that shift played out. So what do we need to know about organizational psychology and where it is today and how we step into leadership of that? Our work cultures. How do we make our places of work a place where people want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's curious is that we just now started, organizational psychology just now started recognizing that workplace stress is a thing, for example, in the 90s, right? So
Yeah.
like in our teen years, we're just now having agencies and lobbyists and organizations to help employers know that, oh, it matters to look at the human and how their work environment impacts them. We're
Mhm.
just now getting into an era where DEI is important, being mindful of inclusion and the equity of services and employee satisfaction. Like there are so many things that are just now becoming a big thing that has always probably been a big thing. But since COVID, for sure, we have a lot of people that I feel as though have gotten faux empowered, is what I like to say.
I love that. Faux empowered.
They're empowered. They feel empowered, but they don't really actually feel empowered. So they have all the buzzwords to say in these interviews, to feel like they're bossing it out. They don't really actually feel that internally. And now we have organizations that are shifting to trends that aren't even really actual trends. People want the structure. People want to have parameters around their work. People want to know that they can meet a standard. People don't want to go to an employer that has no standard and they're so liberal in their culture that anything goes. Just like we say, well, kids thrive in structure, they need parameters and balance. Grown-ups do too. They thrive
Mhm.
in it. People want to know that they can check off, I did this. Because when they know that they've checked it off and done it in satisfactory performance, that they'll be rewarded in somehow, some way. Everybody is reward motivated. I don't care who you are. People like reward of some form or fashion. So yeah, employers really need to be mindful of that when we get so liberal in how we want to run our organization, that we really just don't have very obvious parameters of how to accomplish the task we ask of you, it leaves people really anxious. It leaves employees really anxious on how to meet
Mhm.
those standards and if they're good enough to meet it without the structure in place.
Man, you know what this reminds me of? I've said this several times on the podcast. It reminds me of the difference between being nice and being kind, right? Nice is, doing whatever to save the person's feelings. And so you're just constantly pouring out yeses or not talking about the hard things because you don't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah,
But when you're kind, it is, I care too much to not be clear, to not have boundaries, to not have structure, to not tell you whenever you need feedback, but also to tell you good things too. That's kind. And to me, that's just the summary of all of this when you're engaging is I love what you said that businesses and leaders have gotten so liberal, just loosey goosey with, what, everything kind of goes because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings by having any kind of structure whatsoever. And it's actually worse for production and worse for our mental health because we don't know where we stand. I don't know
absolutely.
what you expect of me. I don't know how to reach it. And I don't know when I'm doing a good job because there's no target.
Yes. Ding, 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 ding. You have IO psych down just like that in 3 minutes. You're awesome.
But here's the deal. See, thank you for this counseling session. I needed to like lay on the proverbial couch to have you kind of lay all this out so that I can understand of, oh my gosh, it's like the breakthrough of, this is what the way that I need to be. So, one of the things that you're really, really good at doing is helping organizations go from distress to learning how to address the problem to then finding a resolution. So you're speaking to a very broad audience, right? We have people that are individual contributors wanting to become leaders. We have people that lead, small teams, and then we have people leading entire organizations. And we have listeners all around the world, which is fabulous. So how do we understand the process of going from a problem, like there's distress, to addressing the issue to then finding resolution? So what do we need to know to be able to step through that and counsel in that moment?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest things that I think is super important is starting with mindfulness. really going back to what is going on and how's it making me feel? Why is this a problem? Why does this keep me up at night? Thinking through that. We can't go and seek counsel or advice or wisdom from anybody if we don't first articulate for ourselves what the issue is. And so that's this first step, is figuring out what is going on that is distressing to me or my organization. From there, we start looking at, okay, where is wise counsel? We have to look. I mean, sometimes, like, I think it's Proverbs maybe 12 and 15 that says that we can go through and we think that our ways are the best ways, but it's really when we kind of get all wise counsel that we show that we are wise in what we're trying to do and accomplish. And so we have to get counsel on these things that are distressing. And sometimes that means a consultant. Sometimes that means, a trusted loved one. Sometimes that means it's someone that doesn't look like you at all, that has had an experience that was similar, that can say, hey, here's something that's, that I went through that's kind of similar to what you're going through. Here are the steps that I took. Counsel should come in many forms. And people say it all the time, but you can learn a lot from, what was that thing with the crash car dummies? You can learn a lot from a dummy. You think something doesn't have value, but if you actually just got to pay attention, it's like, oh, yeah, I could learn something from there.
Yeah.
Right. So know what it is that is the distressing thing, be able to pick it apart, that you can articulate it to someone that you're getting counsel from. Get that counsel, see how that is applicable to your issue. And then after you've gotten some counsel, then see what you can implement. You get the counsel, you see, well, some of that applies to me in my circumstance, but some of it doesn't, or some of it doesn't feel organic to me. Am I able to implement this? Because that's another thing, is you can go and get advice from someone. They tell you specifically what to do, and then you're trying to walk in those steps that aren't even meant for you. Those aren't your shoes.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of getting counsel is just to get a perspective that is outside of our own, because sometimes that's all we need, is just that perspective. Add some layers to what I already know, mull it together, and then come up with something that feels like a solution that I am able to implement. And then
Yeah.
it'd be actionable item. Start the implementation of it, right? So it seems very basic, but I think that's really where we have to start.
Yeah. And I think we try to get so fancy with everything that we miss the foundational basics, as Jason would say, my husband, blocking and tackling. If you don't do that, you're not going to have a good football game. Stop getting fancy with the plays, blocking and tackling, right? And I think he got it from a previous boss, but it's so true. Like, we're skipping over these foundational things. Just like you said, mindfulness, paying attention to what is the problem? How am I seeing this problem? How is it affecting negatively? What's the distress point? And then seeking counsel. So often we try to do things on our own because we have that image management control. We don't want people to see us as not knowing what we're doing. Instead of turning and saying, hey, I'm going through this situation. Can you provide, as you said, wise counsel and help me see it from a different perspective? Then you will be able to know what the next step is that you can actually implement to solve it. So thank you for reminding us that, start with the basics, guys. Stop skipping over that.
What did Daddy used to tell us all the time? We have to run, hit, catch, and throw. Like, it's just the basics. This just the basics to win the game. Yeah.
Man, absolutely. Absolutely. So as we look to thinking about ourselves, being mindful of ourselves in leadership, right? One, we got to pay attention to the psychology. If you don't pay attention to what's going on around you and noticing people and how they're feeling or what they're going through or what they were doing, now they're not doing. If you don't notice all that, you're going to be burned by your ignorance of it. Pay attention, grow in your leadership, grow in your noticing skills. But when it comes to leadership, and it doesn't really matter the pay grade here, whether I'm leading up or leading across or leading down, how do we truly step in and step out so that we can lead and make a positive impact on our places of work? So taking everything that you've kind of talked to us about with just understanding mental health, right? We can't have no structure. That's causing issues. People are self-diagnosing, bringing that stuff in. So be careful with all that. But how do we make that positive impact with those that we lead? Again, doesn't matter the pay grade, leading up, leading across, leading down. How do we make a positive impact?
We have to be cognizant of how we show up. Again, it's super simple. But if I am unaware of how I am impacting people, I'm doing something wrong. That means I'm not being mindful of myself, which means I can't even be mindful of what's going on around me. Another basic thing is knowing my motives. As leaders, we if we don't pause to say, what is my motive for wanting to be in this role and position? It goes back to our heart posture. We can have on expensive clothes and fancy cufflinks and our really fresh done hair. But if our heart posture is ugly or in the wrong place, it will eventually come out. We can be politically correct all day, but our heart will expose us eventually. Have you heard of the term a Freudian slip, where a person just kind of says something that's like, okay, I didn't mean to say that. Yes, you did. You did
Yes, you
mean to
did.
say that. And those hot mic moments, it's like, wow, the president said what? Those are the things that we have to be mindful of. That is what is guiding us as leaders. So if we don't know what's in our heart, if we don't know what our motive is, if we don't know how we're showing up in the world, we're doing leadership wrong.
That is so good. So good. And that's where you got to start. What is your motivation? I think so many times we can be so self-focused, and leadership's the opposite. It's very much people-focused, serving focused. That's what it should be. And so, guys, pray and ask God to reveal the motivation of your heart. I think it's really important. A lot of times we're so blinded to our own issues or our own motivations. So pray and ask and seek to find that out. I love it. And, in the Bible, it talks about, from your heart, that's where your words come from, right? Your words are an abundance of your heart overflowing. So, and I love this. You actually gave me this Bible verse, and I'll read it later as well. But Proverbs 12:18, there is one whose harsh, rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And so our words do play a huge part in the overall mental health and the work culture, of our places of work. So words matter. So I love all of the wisdom that you've given us. So thinking about everything that you've taught us today, and you've taught us a lot. All right, let's kind of recap. What are some key takeaways that our listeners need to apply to grow in their leadership and understanding of leading in the mental health areas?
Yeah, yep. So being mindful that we are not above reproach as leaders. We get perspective, we get wise counsels. That's a big point. Being mindful that leaders should not have loose lips, because our words matter. They really truly do matter, because that kind of segues into the last point of just being mindful that leaders cultivate the climate and the culture of their environment, whether it's at home or in the workforce. We have to use our words. We have to be intentional to just cultivate that culture, cultivate working it, tending to, giving it special attention. We have to be intentional about doing that, pouring into the environment that we're trying to um, see succeed. Because when people see us doing that, it makes them want to, if not improve how they're showing up themselves, just they at least see that somebody is caring about the environment that they're in. So cultivating the culture that you're at, not having loose lips, and then getting counsel when appropriate.
So good. And I just love that. Loose lips sink ships.
Yes.
So good. All right. So speaking of loose lips, something negative. What is one poor decision that you would tell our leaders to avoid? Like, don't do this. You're better than that.
Don't do this. You're better than that. Um, Oh, yes, showing up to a sticky conversation unprepared. And when it gets too sticky, you shut the person down. I get it. Some people will cut a fool and get to cussing and fussing and flaring, and I get that. Stay safe. But for the most part, you're probably safe, even if all that is happening. What you can do as a leader in those moments is just slow it down and acknowledge what is. And when we don't do that, a lot of damage, definitely morale is negatively impacted when we don't.
Man, very, very good, man. Well, Raysha, thank you so much for being here. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and your work?
Yes. So I try to do social media. I'm just not great, but I have an Instagram page that me and my oldest started try to do stuff on. It's hashtag I'm your shrink. Oh, so catchy.
Nice.
And then my primary source, though, is my website, www.thecollectivecounseling.com. On there, you'll learn that I do consultant work, I do keynote speaking, I also do individual therapy, I do brain mapping and neural feedback. I'm super excited about that. Arkansas is a little bit behind the times of using neural feedback to help minimize some of our maladaptive behavior and symptoms. So, super excited about that.
Man, that is awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I'm just so excited that I got to talk to you. I'm really passionate about us growing in our knowledge of just mental health, psychology, and overall just caring for people, being good stewards of the people in our care as leaders. And so I think your work ties into all of that. It really comes down to the heart, like you said, the motivation of the heart and truly caring for people. So I thank you so much for your wisdom today. It was wonderful.
Yes, well, I appreciate the invite. It was good as always to see you. I appreciate being here today.
And all right, guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Hey, it's Bethany again. If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. Also, be sure to rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership, and through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. If you feel this podcast is helpful, be sure to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers, or anyone who wants to grow in leadership, but also have harmony between their work and home life. Thanks, and I'll see you again in the next episode.